All right, my default head placement kind of obscured a bunch of this when I first tried it, so I'm giving this another recording. In this module, we're going to be focusing on scientific communication and APA style. Also, before anybody asks about it, I got tired of 90-degree days and cut my hair, and since I need to take off my glasses to cut my hair, kind of went a little bit overboard. I don't regret it though, because I can actually survive in July weather now. All right, on to our first video, in which we'll be focusing on conducting the literature review. So there are three parts of this. First, we'll talk about types of sources, then we'll talk about types of search engines, then we'll talk about actually conducting the search, which includes advanced searches. So first off, a few terms related to types of sources that you need to be aware of. First off is popular sources. Now, this doesn't mean sources that get a lot of clicks or sources that people really like or find credible. Popular sources means of the people. So these are sources that can be written and published by anybody and can be published very quickly. So there are, of course, degrees to this. A newspaper, for example, does go through some amount of review process. Can't necessarily be posted on the minute. But a newspaper article is written on Monday to publish it on Tuesday. Now, in contrast, we look at academic sources. These are usually written by somebody with academic credentials. They undergo a peer review process and are published very slowly. An academic article, 3 months would probably be considered extremely quick. Generally, an article is submitted. After several months, they get a review back, make changes, repeat that process several times, and it might be 2-3 years from the initial publication until it's actually published. So let's look at some examples. Popular sources, we have blog posts, web pages, we have newspaper articles, which again, there's some credentials and some review, but not nearly as much or not nearly the same type as an academic source. Magazines, and the vast majority of books. So even books that involve science, most of them are written using this popular source format. They're written by one person, they're published. There's not necessarily any other scientists looking it over for the methodology or any inaccuracies. So these are popular sources. Comparatively, we have academic sources. So in this case, we have peer-reviewed journal articles, which is the primary academic source and what we'll be focusing on during this class. And we also have scientific books, like the example that you see in the top right corner. So scientific books are generally much less attention-grabbing than popular books. They're written, and they are published by an academic press. And they're generally written in much the same way as an academic article, although it may be questionable how much peer review it goes through. It kind of depends on whether it's independently published or part of some sort of series that's edited and so forth. Finally, we have encyclopedias and dictionaries. These are kind of a special case because you wouldn't go into an encyclopedia and say, this is my example of, cutting-edge research on a given theory. But encyclopedias and dictionaries can generally be relied on to have truthful information. So if you can't find a definition for something in a journal article, you might go to the Dictionary of Social Sciences and use the definition that's present in there. From there, we move on to types of search engines. So I'm going to focus on 3 types of search engines today. First off, we have Google, which is a very well-known, very popular search engine. And I'm going to type therapy dogs in here. We'll look at the type of results that we get. First off, you can see that we got 290 million results. That's kind of excessive if you're doing a literature review. That's a bit more than a person can typically read. And let's look at the type of results that we get. So this is a .com, so it's a commercial site intended for profit. We have some data scraping here of possible answers to questions. This is also a .com, although it says it's through a journal, so maybe potentially worth looking and see if they have if it's an academic journal or not. Here we have a .org representing a service animal organization. Here we have another .org. Scroll down a bit farther. We have Wikipedia, which is very useful for looking at the references section, but is not really an academic source on its own, right? Anybody can publish it, anybody can edit it, which sort of makes it the definition of a popular source. We go a bit farther, we have these newspapers, blogs, magazines, so all of these popular sources, right? Probably the articles were written and published on within a day of each other. So let's do the same search under Google Scholar. This is scholar.google.com. And we search for therapy dogs. So here we have about 1.9 million results. So still a lot of results, a bit less, but still a lot. We see a lot of journals and books. The vast majority of Google Scholar results are going to be academic sources. They're pulled from all disciplines, so these aren't necessarily going to be a psychology. There might be some on the biology of dogs or things like that. And another thing that you might see here is that while some of these, you see there's a PDF, others are not necessarily available, right? Some of these go to a Find It link because I'm logged in to Ohio University with my Google account. This, is just links to Taylor and Francis website. I can almost guarantee that I would have to pay to access this, and so forth. Finally, we move on to a bit of a different type of search engine. We go to the Ohio University Library website to start with. That's ohio.edu/library. So if you're not familiar with that, it's a very good idea to become familiar with it. And we can make a search on Articles Plus. But what we're actually going to do is go to databases, and I'm going to type psych into here for some psychology databases. So these will only bring up articles from psychology journals and other curated sources. I'm going to click on Psych Info. This is a database that's curated by the American Psychological Association, and access to that is paid for by the university. So I will connect. And here we see it says searching APA Psych Info. We're on the search engine site, which is EBSCO. So if I say EBSCO, it'll be the same as Psych Info for the duration of this video. And I'm going to search therapy dogs in Psych Info. And what I have here is there are 414 results. So that's a lot fewer results than the previous two engines, possibly too few if you go through them and you don't find what you're looking for. So let's go back to the slides and look at conducting the search. Okay, so here we have, we're looking at our search term, which was therapy dogs, and we're looking at ways to kind of change that to conduct other searches. So there's two ways of, or two reasons we might want to change this. First off, you might be looking for a more general search, which would have more results. Maybe that 414 was not enough, but you want to stick to Psych Info. Or you might want fewer results. You want it to be more specific. So maybe maybe that's too many results, and it's giving you a lot of stuff you don't need. So here is a quick mock-up of just some ways you might spin therapy dogs. If you're looking for more results, you might change therapy to calming, support, counseling. You might substitute dogs with canines, animals, pets, cats, right? Research on cats in therapy might have similar utility as research in dogs in therapy. Or maybe you want it to be more specific. You're looking for very specific types of therapy dogs. You might be looking for PTSD therapy dogs that are used to working with children or have been studied working with children. You might be looking to compare animal-assisted therapy and emotional support dogs and how they function differently. Another way of editing your search in order to change the amount of results is using Boolean operators. So you can think of Boolean operators as short snippets of code that are recognized by the search engine that cause it to behave in different ways. So if you use AND, it makes it more specific. You're looking for very specifically results that have both of the words on either side of AND. If you use OR, it's the exact opposite. If it has one or if it has the other, it'll be positive, so it's more general. Similarly, there's NOT, which exclude the word following it, or quotation marks. So let's see that in action. So let's look at Google Scholar. So let's say I'm searching for, well, we already searched for therapy dogs. What if I search for therapy and dogs? So that I now have about 3 million results. Anything in Google Scholar that refers to therapy or refers to dogs is on this list. Comparatively, let's say instead of AND, we put OR. So now there's over 6 million results. I need to back up a second. Okay. So I searched for therapy and dogs. So any article that has both the word therapy and the word dogs in its title or in its abstract comes up here. Comparatively, let's say I change AND to OR. Now there's over 6.5 million results. So any article with the word therapy shows up on this results, and any article with the word dogs also shows up on these results. Let's look at this another way. Put quotation marks, therapy dogs, and that severely limits it. So it looks at therapy dogs as if it were a single word, and there's only about 8,000 results. So that's still a lot, but it's drastically fewer than what we saw before. Let's take another step. Let's say I do not want anything to do with depression. Say that has nothing to do with what I'm researching. So I type not depression. Well, that cut the results farther than in half. Now there's about 3,500 results. So as you can see how Boolean phrases help the search. Now that said, Google and Google Scholar, they use Google's sort of AI programming that kind of looks for synonyms from time to time, which also lets you do things like ask a question. I'm pretty sure that works in Google Scholar the same way it works in Google. So if I were to type, what dogs are effective for therapy, I get almost 700,000 results using Google Scholar. However, if I were to compare that to EBSCO and I were to type what dogs are effective for therapy and search for APA Psych Info, there's one result. I'm surprised there was even that result. I must have changed the term I was looking for because last time I got 0 results. And I'm not actually sure why this result came up because only the word therapy is included. So they must have, this question must appear somewhere in the text of this article or this book. So what we can do with EBSCO, you see there's multiple fields here, so it sort of brings us to an advanced search by default, but I'm going to click on advanced search and put some terms. So we said that dogs and canines were synonyms, right? So I'll say dogs or canines, and therapy. So any result that talks about therapy and also either talks about dogs or canines will come up in these results. So now we have over 14,000 results. So that's a real difference from that 414 before. So these are some of the most common tools you can use when focusing on conducting your literature review. There are others, but they get a bit more niche and a bit more situational. So these are tools you can use when conducting your search.